Welcome to the Business of Government Hour TV, a video companion to our flagship radio program. I'm Michael Keegan, your host. Each week, government executives and thought leaders join me for an informative, insightful, and in-depth conversation on improving government and its effectiveness. These individuals are truly changing the way government does business. What is a weather-ready nation? And how is the National Weather Service keeping Americans safe? I'll explore these questions and so much more with our very special guest, Dr. Louis Uccellini, Director of the National Weather Service. Also joining my conversation from IBM is Alan Heath. Take a look and take a listen. You can download the entire interview at Podcast One, iTunes, and at businessofgovernment.org. So, Doctor, could you provide us with an overview of the history and mission of the National Weather Service? And more particularly, how does it serve the mission of NOAA and the larger Department of Commerce?
So the history of the Weather Service, the National Weather Service, is actually rooted in decisions that were made after the Civil War and the expansion of our population westward into areas that were known to be let's put it this way, more challenging weather-wise. The stories were already out about blizzards and, tornadoes that people didn't really experience on the East Coast in the early history of the United States. So the Signal Corps, which is part of the Army, actually got the first authorization to provide weather data and indications of what might come next. So that was done within the Signal Corps, and that was established in 1870. By 1891, a decision was made to relocate that function in a National Weather Bureau in the Department of Agriculture. And it's hard to connect all the dots with respect to the decision to make that move. But in 1888, we had the blizzard of '88 along the East Coast. There was also the children's blizzard that David Laskins wrote about in the Midwest. There were other storm systems that were not predicted very well, and there was a huge loss of life in these storms. So the argument was made to get this into a civil organization, and the Department of Agriculture became the home of the Weather Bureau in 1891. In the 1940-41 timeframe, President Roosevelt moved it to the Department of Commerce as it still maintaining the mission of providing weather, water, and climate information for the protection of life and property and for the enhancement of the national economy. So that mission statement, which became more evident, in the 1891 transfer to the Department of Agriculture, was certainly solidified, and that's the mission we live with today. And in that move was from the Department of Agriculture to the Department of Commerce, and in some respects, that's where the enhancement of the national economy came to play.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how is the now? Do you refer to it as NWS at all, or is it more always the National Weather Service?
Well, it's both.
It's both. How is it organized? What's the size of your budget? And can you give us a sense of the operational footprint?
Yeah. So the National Weather Service is fundamentally an operational unit. We have the action verb in our mission statement to provide the data for weather, water, and climate, and to provide forecasts to actually predict the future state, which is a very unique aspect of a mission statement for a government agency. And within NOAA, the word predict actually maps into their mission statement as well. It's the only agency in the federal government that has that word in it, okay? We really take seriously, and we're passionate about the protection of life and property. And you'll see the people who work for the Weather Service, whether they're reviewed by McKinsey, whether they're written about by David Laskins and others. There's Mission Mystique, a book that's just been written, has a whole chapter on the National Weather Service. You just won't find the passion and commitment and dedication that you have in National Weather Service employees. And I can say that because this is what people write about us. When people do surveys of other government agencies and map our dedication to the mission and commitment to public service, the words that are used are off the charts, okay? So we have that going for us. And trust me, the workforce brings that to their jobs every day. And we see people writing about it, like during the recent shutdown, during the recent blizzards in the Midwest, folks camping out in the office to ensure that they were there during the duration of the storm. That is the National Weather Service. Now, the domain space is, and I don't think many people realize this, our westernmost office is in Guam. Yeah. We have smaller offices in the states out in the Southwest Pacific. So I say our domain space is from Guam and Alaska to Puerto Rico. Our domain space and our service areas range from the Ocean Prediction Center to the Space Weather Prediction Center, so we cover the whole area from the sun to the sea. And I tell my workforce, if you're not interested in that domain, you're in the wrong place. So it's quite a responsibility to handle that. And one of the reasons we've gained that responsibility, and of course we have climate, weather, and water, so we have the flood prediction aspect of our service as well. The reason we've accumulated this is that you have to build an infrastructure, and you have to manage that infrastructure to make that work, not only for accuracy and consistency, but reliability. People expect the data and the forecast to be on time every time. So you have to have an infrastructure for that. And that's an incredible accomplishment in and of itself. We deal with billions of observations a day. We make forecasts out to days, weeks, months in advance, every day, from the sun to the sea. You got to have that reliability built in as well. So that's basically the captures our daily existence.
Well, how much does it cost to do this?
Well, from a base funding perspective, we're at $1.02 billion a year. But then we have projects that are involved that actually get us into about the $1.1 billion budget now. Yeah.
Louis, tell us a little bit more about your reorganization of NWS.
The field structure of local, regional, and national presence was actually, when I came and got this position, I felt very comfortable with that we were actually in a right area with respect to that. But the budget planning process, the budget execution, the management of our resources that are directed towards that field structure was where the problem was. And so we, to build a weather-ready nation, to realize our mission, I felt very strongly that we had to deal with the core issues of budget acquisition, budget management, program management, and ensuring that we were directing our resources to the right places of the organization, our workforce especially, that would allow us to meet the goals and to meet our mission every day. And that came right back at headquarters. So when I arrived, and I was aware of this because I was part of a corporate board before I got this job, I could see we had 25 budget categories that nobody knew how they even got there, how they interplayed with each other. Two of those categories was local warnings and forecasts and central forecast guidance. So two of those categories had the word forecast in it. It took 71% of the budget, had about almost 90% of the FTEs. There were folks, in the organization above us and up on the Hill that thought those were all forecasters. That 70% of our budget was on forecasts, but everything was in those two budget categories. I use the expression "everything but the kitchen sink." So, it was a real lack of visibility of what was in there. But more importantly, there was a lot of confusion amongst the category. And during fiscal years, there'd be money shifted from one to the other, which is not allowed. right? You can't do that. So when I came in, I felt very strongly that, and I actually said this one time with one of the budget officials, young budget officials in the National Weather Service when I was leading a program for NOAA, to try to do a cross-cut for NOAA, that we needed to simplify the budget structure that mapped our functions. And this individual, who I will not name, said, well, someday, son, when you're the head of the Weather Service, maybe you can do that, but we're not doing that now, right? So, yeah, so what I was driving towards was, I defined a forecast process for you: observation, central processing, analyze, forecast, support as a total, with support being our link to decision makers, and then dissemination, and then so that's our forecast process. And then you've got to fix it, you've got to improve it, you got to replace components, whatever. That's science and technology integration, and then you got to house it in facilities. So today we have 6 budget categories. And I cannot define for you what the 25 budget categories are, the previous one, even though I had 14 years experience with them. But they're gone. But I can talk not only to these 6 budget portfolios, I can tell you the priorities in each one. I can tell you how we plan for the 3-year budget cycle. What comes out of those plans from the appropriation is what drives then the action for the current fiscal year, what the priorities are, what the schedules are, what the budget allocations are within the elements within that. We no longer are offloading observation stuff to map in, or the central computer to map into analyze, forecast, support. We can defend the 44% of the budget that's actually the analyzed forecast, not the 71%, but the 44%. We can defend that, we can articulate, we can show how the value proposition and how the money's being spent. Right. We couldn't do that before. So that was extremely important. We also now have 6 offices, right? We have the Office of Observations, the Office of Central Processing, the AFSO, the Office of the Analyzed Forecast Support Office, Office of Dissemination, STI Office, and Office of Facilities. So we have a one-to-one match of the administrative offices with the budget category. So we have responsibilities for budget planning and budget execution that are mapped to agency goals, right, that now operate every day. And we have all of this written. We have a document as a process that's signed by every SESer in the organization. Not only the SESers in the headquarters, but the ones that are also out in the field that have to make this work, because we can't have random walks, right? Because that'll just drain from our ability. So we now have a signature. We have buy-in. And one of the reasons we have buy-in from all the SESs is that we know the governance document's not perfect. It's only 3 years old. So we had built right into there that we will evaluate how that governance document is working every year and update if necessary. Okay? That's how we get all the signatures, because we're holding people responsible. We're also doing quarterly reviews. We got, 150 high items that map across there. That's 5 hours a day for 2 days every quarter. Either me or my deputy are sitting, listening to everyone. It's a quad chart, goes right through each one. And if we have a condition read, we're on it. Okay, we're not waiting to find out, 2 years into a thing that we got a problem that we're not going to meet our schedule, and oh, by the way, we're over budget. We got to go to the Hill for more money. Those days are over. Okay, so that is important because we now have the trust of our stakeholders, but it's also important because this is all directed towards making the field structure work. It's all directed with requirements set by Analyze, Forecast, Support.
So, Doctor, I understand you just updated your strategic plan for the National Weather Service. Could you briefly outline for us your strategic vision and, more importantly, your priorities?
So the strategic vision for the National Weather Service remains intact from a strategic plan we introduced in the 2012-2013 timeframe, which is to build a weather-ready nation. where the communities are ready and responsive and therefore resilient to extreme weather, water, and climate events. That was a big deal for us then, in 2012, 2013, when we updated the strategic plan. We made sure that we embrace that same goal today because we're making progress, but we're not there yet. In order to build a weather-ready nation, we recognize that providing the weather, water, and climate information and forecast to the general public and to decision makers is not enough. That, what we have stated in our mission statement, we have to actually work with those decision makers. We have to ensure that we understand what they need because they're the ones that are out there saving lives and property. They're the ones evacuating people from a hurricane that's approaching a coastal zone. They're the ones who are dealing with communities to get them to actually go to shelters or evacuate in the face of floods. And so how do you connect all of the information that we provide as physical scientists to decision makers, which are inherently dealing with human factors, to get people to evacuate? And I think the most common one that people see is that there are those who will decide to stay on a coastline in the face of an oncoming hurricane, right? Many people do evacuate, but how that happens is a very important, understanding how that happens is a very important aspect of what we need to do to feed the right information for those decision makers to get people to respond. So this strategic plan is really, in certain sense, directed at our workforce, that they have to evolve how they work and what they have to bring to the table every day in terms of physical science, and now an increasing understanding of social science and decision making, and understanding how our partners in the emergency management community at the federal, state, and local levels, especially at the local levels where most of these decisions are made, and how we then couch our products and services and work with them as a true partner. Basically, that's the crux of how the strategic plan is sort of directed at our workforce. It takes an infrastructure, it takes science and technology to make that work with greater accuracy and make the whole system work with more reliability, because you got to be there on time all the time. And then the last component, or another component of this, is that we can't do this alone. And this is one of the feedback we got from the NAPA team, the National Academy of Public Administration, back in 2012 and 13, is this is one of the best strategic outcomes they've seen. And then basically in all the oral presentations to me and to our bosses and to other folks in the federal government is, you can't do it alone. You literally cannot accomplish this goal alone. So we have to work with our partners who are making decisions, but we also have to work with the larger enterprise, because it's not just the National Weather Service in this country. This is an incredible, diverse private sector that's now working in the same space, providing observations to us, dissemination, managing dissemination lines, providing forecasts and warnings to customers in a very tailored way. They deal with the retail industry. They deal with road safety. They increasingly in the energy community. There's a whole spectrum now of activities. Remember the enhancing the national economy as part of our mission statement? Well, there's a growing private sector, and by different estimates, it's over a $10 billion industry now across this whole spectrum of activities that we do. How do you work with them? How do you get them to buy into the same strategic goal, so we're all working towards the same result of a consistency, accurate, timely forecast and warning? Because the public safety and infrastructure the safety of the infrastructure itself, is a function of us and them. So we have a goal within our strategic plan to include all of these partners in everything we're doing, and that in itself is a major task. It's working, and there's certainly a willingness amongst our partners across that whole spectrum that I just defined.
So speaking of which, as you try to provide those more precise forecasts, early warning for the citizens, how does that tie into your impact-based decision support services?
Well, the impact-based decision support services is built off the same concept of having accurate forecasts provided on a timely basis. And we're talking forecasts now across the whole spectrum of the Earth system sciences, like I said, the land, hydrology, weather, atmosphere, that's impacted by the oceans and the cryosphere. Where the impact-based decision support services are is that working with core partners and deep relationships. And we've focused by law now, by the Weather Act of 2017 and now updated in 2019, that we are to work with the federal, state, local, and tribal nations. And what that means is that to understand what their decision process is, to understand what they need to make decisions 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 day in advance. So it's a tick-tock that basically gets them prepared to move, and then as you approach an event and it really looks like it is going to happen, they then take steps, and so there are key decision points and all that. The only way to understand what they do is that you have to be at their tabletop exercises. You have to practice with them. You just can't show up the 3 hours before the event and say, okay, I'm here. What do you need, right? You have to know what they need. You have to prepare yourself for what they need. You have to communicate the uncertainty, because we can't give them a perfect forecast. It's the one thing we can guarantee them, is that we can't give them a perfect forecast. So the longer out in time that they need to make a decision, the less accuracy the forecast is going to have. So how do you convey the uncertainty of that for the decisions that they have to make? So it's that practice. You build a trusted relationship by this process, and that relationship flows both ways. And so when a big event comes up and they're looking at you right in the eye, or looking at the forecaster that they now have come to trust, and that forecaster says, this is going to be the big one, right? This is going to be the storm that hits this community. This is the storm like in Taylorville, Illinois, on December 1st of the past year. This is a likely tornadic outbreak that could affect your Christmas parade at 5 o'clock that Saturday evening. So that with that trusted relationship, even before the storm is forming, but the conditions are getting ripe for this, and the likelihood that something could happen, in the future we would have a facets type of a continuum of information that is showing them the increasing likelihood. They don't make that decision 4:45. They don't want people coming. Yeah. So that's a decision to cancel a major event for that town at noon or 1 o'clock. And the tornado ripped the block. When the tornado did occur, it was an F3 or F2 to an F3, moved right within a block of where those people were. And we've got testimonials from the local officials that undoubtedly we saved lives, right? So that happens with that kind of, that's the IDSS connecting us to the decision making.
Yeah, and I want to talk about working together, because throughout this conversation, You've introduced us to the strategic vision, the way you operate. But what I'd like to talk about is kind of rope a couple of questions together. And that is, since you've taken over, how have you sort of reorganized the National Weather Service to make sure you have the right people in the right places at the right spots with the right expertise? Because you must be doing something right, because as I understand it, you rank among one of the highest agencies in employee motivation and dedication to mission. So what's going on in that area?
So a couple of things that we had to do to make this work, because you can see all the disciplines that we're working with within the physical sciences and then within government decision aspects. There has to be a greater sense of collaboration. So we were dealing with fundamental cultural issues within individual offices. We came out of a very successful modernization in the last part of the last century. By all measures, the modernization associated restructuring of the National Weather Service was declared a success. Brought us the radars, brought us the green meteorologists, brought us a distributed infrastructure and offices that actually would serve the mission, automated surface observing systems, better models, the whole thing. We got all that. The forecasters, though, they would release something from an office that was generated in that office. That was their driver. We got centers, we've got regional forecast offices, they got to work together. And it's not just coordination, it's collaboration. It's treating each other in these various components of the Weather Service as an equal partner, as an important resource to get your job done, to get that information to your local decision makers. You can look over your shoulders to your centers and to your regional offices as collaborators, not as competitors. We're all trying to get with one weather service, one forecast that people can respond to. So that change was important, extremely important. And this notion that you had to provide IDSS not only to meet a strategic goal, but to actually meet your mission. I say today that the workforce has embraced this. It's amazing the extent to which they've embraced this, and they make it work every day. It's really beautiful to watch, to tell you the truth.
Be sure to join me next time on the Business of Government Hour TV for another informative, insightful, and in-depth conversation on improving government and its effectiveness. Until next time, it's businessofgovernment.org.